Okay, so in statistics, we started with discussing two types of statistics, descriptive and inferential, and then we moved on to discussing mean, median, modes, and measures of central tendency. Then we moved on to discussing dispersion in data. Then we discussed probabilities, then probability distributions. Now we are still on statistics. So in statistics, we discussed in very initially at very start we discussed that there is a data set which is known as population, which comprise all the possible observation. But it is difficult to analyze population. So what you do is you draw out a smaller group from that population which represents that population, and this is known as sample. And if you calculate a statistic of sample, that is known as sample statistic. And if you calculate some statistic of population, that is known as parameter. So this is from the very first discussion on or class on statistics. Now this reading is about this sample, that how do you form this sample or how do you use this sample and so on. So how do you draw this sample? There can be different types of sampling, or there can be different ways in which you can draw this sample out of population. So one of the ways to draw out a sample, or two of the, I would say, major ways of drawing out a sample are random selection, which would give you a random sample, random normal sample, or stratified sampling. So what do we mean by random sampling or random selection or random sampling? So let's say I'm talking about, let's say, for example, an equity market. In that equity market, there will be many assets, hundreds of assets. Let's say that some assets are from consumer sector. So consumer sector has, let's say for example, there are 100 stocks from consumer sector. Let's say there are 50 stocks from financial sector, and for example, maybe tax sector, let's say 60 stocks from tax sector, and so on. So there can be many sectors and many stocks. So let's say this is my population, and this population is 210. If I sum them up, 210. I want to draw a sample, and I want to draw a sample of, for example, 10 stocks or 20 stocks. So if I want to draw a 20 stock sample, one of the ways in which I can draw it is random sampling or random selection. Random sampling is the one in which I will combine all of these, take this 210 and randomly select any 20 from this 210. And so each one of these would have equal chance of being selected. That is random sampling, when each observation has equal chance of being selected, or each variable has equal chance of being selected. But then again, what's the problem? Problem is that maybe I end up selecting all of the 20 from consumer sector. Maybe I end up selecting 18 from financial sector. Each have equal chance, so there is a possibility that most of them are from financial sector or most of them are from tax sector. So that means this sample might not represent the exact proportion as the population with respect to sectors. So sector split in population may get different from, this is just an example to explain. Sector split in population may get different from sector split in sample. So what do you do? So there you can use another type of sampling which is known as stratified sampling. In a stratified sampling, you still randomly select observations or variables, but you select based on their proportion. So what you do, you know that 100 are consumer sector, 50 FS and 60 tech. So you know that from this 100 divided by 200 are consumer sector. So if I do 100 divided by 200, it will be approximately 48%. For example, approximately 48% are consumer sector, 50 are financial sector, which is approximately 24%, and the remaining would be tax sector, which is 28%. So I know that in population I have 48% consumer, 24% financial sector and 28% tax. I am making a sample of 20. Now within this 20, I will again allocate in the same proportion. So I will decide that consumer sector should be 48% of 20. So it will be around 10. I will decide that it should be 24% of 20, which is around 5, and 5 would be here. So 4.5, I cannot take 4.5 or 4.8, so I have counted it off. So that means from 2010 would go into consumer sector, 5 into FS, and 5 into tax. So I have decided proportion based on population. Now how do I select this 10? I can select this 10 from this 100 using random sampling. This is known as stratified sampling, in which you have selected the assets or observations proportionately compared to population. So remember the difference between random sampling and stratified sampling. Any confusion so far? Another key point to note is that no matter how accurately you form the sample will still be somewhat different from population, because this cannot be accurately the same as population. So that means sample result may be somewhat different from population. The difference between population result and sample result is known as sampling bias. Sampling bias is the difference coming in due to your choice of sampling technique, or due to your sampling strategy, or due to your sample. If sampling bias is high, that means sample does not accurately represent population. If sampling bias is very low, that means sampling nearly represents population and it is good to go. Any problem so far? Parameter, statistic, random sampling, sampling error. So sampling bias or sampling error, same thing. Sampling distribution of a statistic. So moving on, let's say that I have a population of, and again let's say 1000 stocks for example. From this 1000 I have to draw a sample, and let's say I drew a sample A of, for example, 30 stocks. I let's say used random sampling, stratified sampling, or whatever. So this population will have some mean and some standard deviation. This sample will also have some mean and some standard deviation, correct? Let's say I draw another sample B of 30 stocks. It will again have some mean and some standard deviation. Let's say I draw again. It will again have some mean and some standard deviation of sample, and I keep doing it. Let's say I repeat this experiment 30 times. If I repeat this experiment 30 times, then I will have 30 means with me, right? First mean from first one. This might not be the same as population. When I do another, I get another mean, then another mean. Now I have 30 means with me from 30 different samples. If I take average of these 30 means, that would be very much similar, or would be much nearer to population mean. So these means are known as sample statistic. Why? These are the calculations from samples. So these are sample statistic. This mean is known as parameter. If I put in a distribution of this sample statistic, if I plot the distribution of this sample statistic, that is known as sampling distribution of statistic, or distribution of sample statistic. What is the distribution of sample statistic? Distribution of sample statistic would be the distribution of these sample statistic. I have 30 means, so I take those means 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on. So what are the total numbers? 30. If I plot it as a distribution, that is known as distribution of sample statistic, or sampling distribution of statistic. Any problem so far? And this will be much more nearer to parameter. Why? Because I have first taken different samples and then I have plotted means of those samples. So if this population is normally distributed, this distribution will also be approximately normally distributed. This is sample statistic. This sample statistic would have some mean. Obviously, if I plot all the means, then there will be some mean of those means, and it will have some standard deviation. Its standard deviation would be population standard deviation divided by root n. What is n? N is this number of samples, the number of times I repeated this experiment or this sampling. This is n. So this, its standard deviation would be standard deviation of population divided by square root of n approximately. So this is sampling distribution of statistics. So far we had talked about a simple sample. Now from now on we will be talking about sampling distribution of statistic or distribution of sample statistic. This is known as central limit theorem. So central limit theorem is related to distribution of sampling statistic, distribution of sample statistic. Any confusion, conceptual problem so far? So remember, from now on we will be using standard deviation of population divided by square root of n instead of standard deviation. We used standard deviation when we had simple sample, but now we will use this because we will be talking about sampling distribution of statistic. This is known as standard error. Standard deviation divided by square root of n is known as standard error. Remember the term standard error. Okay, so definition of sampling distribution of statistic that we just did. This we had already discussed in previous class, that is time series and cross sectional. When you have cross sectional data you use arithmetic mean, and when you have time series data you use geometric mean. This we have discussed. Stratified random sampling. Stratified and random are done. This is standard error. Okay, so these three are very key points to remember. It says that distribution of sample mean will be approximately normal. So remember, if you take means, if you take 30 samples, for example 60, 100 samples, and if you calculate their means and then you plot those means, it will become approximately normal. Mean of distribution of mean itself will be equal to the mean of population. As we discussed that if I repeat that experiment 30 times or sample 30 times, and if I then calculate mean of those means, it will be equal to the mean of population from which I was drawing it, parameter. The variance of distribution of x bar will be equal to variance of population divided by sample size. So when we have variance, we divide variance by sample size, and when we have standard deviation, we divide standard deviation by square root of n. Why? Because standard deviation is a square root of variance. So either I do this for variance, this is the variance, or standard deviation would be square root of variance divided by square root of n. So remember these 3 points, key points or assumptions of central limit theorem. You should memorize it, so that if you are asked which of the following is an assumption or is not an assumption, you should be able to identify that. Yes. No, so both will be used for variance of the distribution of x bar. So if you have population variance available, if you have population standard deviation available, then you do standard deviation divided by root n, and this is the formula that will be used mostly. Otherwise, if you do not have this, or you have sample data available, then you take sample. Both should give you approximately similar answers, but this is the primary formula. Okay, so moving on, point estimates. So when you are estimating parameter, how do you estimate it? You estimate it from some sample statistic. So you estimate it from sample value. That sample value which is used to estimate parameter is known as point estimate. Point estimate is the sample value used to estimate parameter. In order to calculate point estimate, you will have some formula that you will use, or there will be some logic that you will use, or there will be some working that you do, or some estimate that you use. That estimate, that formula, that logic is known as estimator. So just the terminologies. Key point to remember is the three types of estimator. This is something that you should remember, names and their definition. So there can be three key types of estimator: unbiased, efficient and consistent. Unbiased, efficient and consistent. If expected value of estimator is equal to the parameter you are trying to estimate, that means if the value of your estimator that you are using is giving you the same value as parameter, then it is known as unbiased estimator, which means biasness is very low or there is no biasness. So it is unbiased estimator. Both are giving you the same or accurate result. Efficient is when variance of sampling distribution is smaller than all other unbiased estimators. So if you perform sampling distribution, and for that sampling distribution, if your variance is coming out to be lower compared to all other samples, that is known as efficient estimator. And consistent estimator is that when probability that estimate is close to value of the population parameter increases as sample increases. What do we mean by this? So you have sample statistic or estimate and you have parameter. So maybe there is a difference between these two and there is a chance of difference. Let's say chance of difference is 20% or 30%. If you increase sample size, if by increasing sample size these two become closer, that is chance of difference decreases, then that is known as consistent estimator. So in that case you will say that this estimator is consistent. Why? Because if I increase sample size, then my chances of reaching out to parameter increases. So key point is you should know three names and you should know three one-line definitions, so that if you are asked which one of the following is the characteristic of unbiased estimator, which one of the following is an unbiased or consistent, you should be able to identify it. So if you are told that probability that estimate is close to the value of the population parameter increases as sample size increases, what kind of estimator is it? And you have three options below. So you should be able to select consistent estimator. So you should know these names and their definition. Confidence interval, this is something that we just did with, not with the name of confidence interval, but conceptually. So what is confidence interval? So we discussed that if you have a data set, there is certain probability of data lying within a range. So if I tell you that there is a probability that data will be within, for example, -1% and +1%, there is a, for example, 90% chance of data being between -1 and 1%. This is known as 90% confidence interval. Or if I tell you there is a 95% chance, this will be known as, this -1 to 1 will be known as 95% confidence interval. That is, for example, less than 1% and greater than equal to 1%. This is 95% confidence interval. So this range is known as confidence interval for a specific probability. If let's say that this is, and this can be anything, these are just random numbers, -1 and 1. So if let's say it is 90%, then what is the area in right tail? 5, and left tail 5. Area will be 5%. 5 here, 5 here, and 90 in between, because total is 100%. Any confusion so far? So this remaining area of 10% is known as alpha. So if confidence interval is 90%, alpha is 10%. If confidence interval is 95%, alpha is 5%. So this remaining area is known as alpha. It is the chances of failure or error not falling within this. So 90% is known as level of significance, that you are 90% sure about it. If you are 90% sure, there is a 10% chance that you are not sure about it. So that 10% is the error, or maybe rejecting your hypothesis, or the claim is not true. So means if I am saying that that the return will be between -1 and 1%, I am 90% sure about it. But there is a chance that it might fall below -1 or it may go above 1%. How much chance? 10%. That is alpha. So this 90% is level of significance or confidence level, and remaining is alpha. So moving on, you are told if the population has a normal distribution with a known variance, confidence interval of the population mean can be established by Z-score table. Suppose an investment analyst takes a random sample of US equity mutual funds and calculates average Sharpe ratio. Sample size is 100 and the average Sharpe ratio is 0.45. So N 100 samples average Sharpe ratio is 0.45. Sample has a standard deviation of 0.3. Calculate and interpret the 90% confidence interval for the population mean of all US equity mutual funds by using a reliability factor based on the standard normal distribution. So what you do, you simply convert X value into Z value, and once you have converted X value into Z value, you can find out what is here and what is here. For that you will need table, but it is better to memorize some of the most used values instead of going and taking out table or looking into table again and again. So you should remember at least important values, which are 90, 95, 99. So 90% confidence interval is 1.65. 95% confidence interval is 1.96, and 99% confidence interval is 2.58. What does it mean? It means that if I take 1.65 and minus 1.65, it will cover 90% of data. If I take 1.96 and minus 1.96, it will cover 95% of data, and if I take 2.58 and minus 2.58, that will cover 99% of data. So it is advisable that you remember these 65, 96 and 2.58 so that your calculations become quicker and easier. So far we discussed standard normal distribution, which is Z value, or in which variable is Z. There is another type of distribution which is known as T distribution. While both have similar uses, there is just slight differences. So if you look into this, so when do you use T distribution? So if you are sampling from a population with unknown variance, and if either of these two conditions hold, either first one hold or second one hold, then it is advisable that you use T distribution. That is, either sample size is large or sample is small but population is normally distributed. So when do you use T distribution? You will use it either if population is normally distributed. Otherwise, if population is not normally distributed, then you will use it if sample size is large. Why? Sorry? Generally 30 is considered large, 30 or more generally. So take this as benchmark 30. So if sample size is large. Why? Because assumption is that if you have a large sample size, then generally it will become normalized. That is the key assumption. Okay, so there is another term that you will come across in t-distribution, which is degrees of freedom. Degrees of freedom is simply n minus 1. So if you have one variable, degrees of freedom is n minus 1. If you have two variables, degrees of freedom is n minus 2. So far we are only talking about one variable, so it is n minus 1. As you increase degrees of freedom, t-distribution will approach the shape of normality. That is, as you continue to increase degrees of freedom, t-distribution will start approaching normal shape or normal distribution. Again, for t-distribution, you have a separate table. Like you have a table for z, you also have a table for t-distribution. This is just to tell you that there is a table for t-distribution. Whenever you are looking at table, make sure that you know what is being given in the table. Is it the probability in left hand side or probability on right hand side? Like in this example, you have been told that this is the probability on right hand side, and so you should do your calculations accordingly. Like in previous example that we did in z table, it was the probability in left hand side. Let's do. Okay, so if you have to find out confidence interval, how do you find this out? For confidence interval, you simply do that you convert x into z, and then you find out these values, and based on that you convert these values again back to normal value. So for example, if I ask you what is the 90% confidence interval, you will find out the 90% of values from range of 90% of values from z, and then you convert z into x. So for example, this is 1.65, this is minus 1.65. So you convert this z into x, and then you convert this z into x, and then you get the confidence interval. Otherwise, another key formula or another way to do it is simply that you do x plus minus z into standard deviation divided by root n. Why? So let's say I found out z as 1.65. Now I want to convert it into x. How do I convert it? Formula is z equals x minus x bar divided by standard deviation upon root n. This is the formula. So if I rearrange this formula, I take it here and I bring this from right to left. So it will be z multiplied by standard deviation divided by root n plus x bar equals x. This is how I convert it. So that means if I simply use this formula, x plus z into sample standard deviation divided by root n, this will give me higher end of the confidence interval. Or if I want lower end, I can do it x minus z into standard deviation divided by root n. So simply what I am trying to tell is that concept is the same. All these formulas are being derived from that particular concept. So if you know that concept, you should be able to memorize this formula. You should be able to memorize any other formula that we have discussed. So x plus minus z into standard sample standard deviation divided by square root of n. So either use this formula or do it conceptually. If it is t table instead of z, then it will be x plus minus t into s into standard deviation of n. So simply if it is z variable, you use z. If it is t, you use t. Now the question is that when do you use t or when do you use z? So remember, both are normally interchangeably used, but there are specific cases in which it is better to use t or better to use z. So if you if you have a non-normal distribution, then neither t nor z can be used for non-normal distribution. Both are only used for normal distribution. So none of these can be used. But if you have large sample size for non-normal distribution, then T or Z can be used. Why? Because assumption is if it is a large sample size, then eventually it will approach a normal distribution. So then Z or T will be used. Now when should you use T or Z? So as we discussed earlier, that if you have unknown variance, if you do not know the variance of population, then you go for T, otherwise you can go for Z. If it is known, Z, unknown, T. If it is normally distributed, then again unknown variance, T, known variance, Z. So remember what to be used when. Otherwise, even if you use it interchangeably, answer will be approximately, your final conclusion will approximately be similar. But this is the classification, so remember it. So this is about sampling or distributions or sampling types and all that. Now one key point or the last set of key points is that as we discussed, there can be sampling error. What is it? This is the difference between sample and population. So as there can be sampling error, there will be certain reason for this error or certain thing or certain factor causing this error. That factor is known as sampling bias. So there are different types of sampling biases, some of which are discussed here. One of the types is data mining bias. What is data mining bias? Let's say that you have a data set and you want to find out a trend from it. So there are multiple variables. Let's say it is about shopping trends or it is about shopping habits. So there are multiple variables which cause a sale to be made or for some product to be bought or sold or some shopping to be done. So there are many variables. Now you are trying to find out a trend. You are trying to find out which variable causes what. So you keep on looking in data, keep on finding trend, keep on finding it, and after repeatedly doing it or after looking for a trend for so long, you extract a trend out of it. So if you mine this data too much, there is a chance that you extract a trend which does not even exist. Because you were just trying to find out a trend, you have found a trend, but that trend might not exist. That is known as data mining bias. How should you correct for it? So when you have found a trend, then you should try supporting it with a rationale. So you should try finding out logic. Is there a logic for it? If you can find a logic, that is good. If you cannot find a logic, that means there are chances that maybe this is due to data mining. So you should then test it out of sample. So test it in another sample or maybe out of sample or somewhere else to find out if that trend actually exists or not. That is data mining bias. Another type of bias is survivorship bias. What is survivorship bias? So let's say that you are trying to analyze the performance of funds, historical performance of funds. There are 20 funds and you want to analyze. So let's say there is a mutual fund industry and you want to find out how have mutual funds performed over the past 10 years. So which funds will you take? You will take those funds which are currently present and which have been there for the past 10 years. But there might be some funds which operated in the past, but due to poor performance, they got bankrupt or they may closed down. Got closed down. So if they got closed down, they wouldn't be included in your sample. Correct? Your sample will only include survivors. And generally the chances are that only the good ones survive. So the worst ones would close down. These are general chances. So that means your sample will be biased towards good result. So your return might be upward bias. So this is just an example. This bias can happen anywhere. This is known as survivorship bias. That is, your sample is biased due to only including survivors and excluding those which could not survive. This is survivorship bias. Another bias can be look ahead bias. Look ahead bias happens when you are trying to look ahead of time. So for example, you are doing some valuation and on your analysis you have to have the current year's EPS, but company has not yet announced current year's EPS. So what you do is that you take an estimate of EPS. When you take an estimate of EPS, this is something that is going to happen in future, or this is something that will be released and have not been released as of now. So there is chance that your EPS can be different from the reported EPS when it is reported. That is known as look ahead bias. That is bias due to looking ahead. So there can be different types of sampling biases. You can have data mining bias. We discussed how to investigate it. That is look for logical application. Or this can happen due to trying many variables before stumbling into significant one. That if you keep on trying and then you have found something sometime, then there is a chance that that is due to data mining bias. Sample selection bias. In sample selection, we discussed survivorship bias. We have discussed look ahead bias. And next is time period bias. What do we mean by time period bias? So let's say that you are analyzing the stock market performance. And let's say that you are looking at the last 5 years. So based on the last 5 years sample, you are making your prediction. But maybe no crisis happened in last 5 years. So if no crisis happened in last 5 years, that means your time period taken by you, the time period taken by you does not account for all the possibilities. So your time period frame is biased. Your sample is biased due to having a short time period. So there can be a bias due to short time horizon, having a shorter time period than required. Or on the other hand, let's say that you have taken last 30 years of data. So maybe something happened in the last 30 years, some event happened which will not happen in future. Maybe market have changed, dynamics have changed, consumer have changed. There were companies which were performing very well 30 years back, but they wouldn't ever perform in future because trends have changed. So that means you have taken a too long of time, which has caused time period bias. So this is due to long time horizon. So time period bias is not necessarily a short time is due to short time period or longer time period. It is due to having a time period which is not related to your analysis, which is not aligned with your analysis. Sometimes you will need a long time horizon, sometimes you will need a short time horizon. Your time horizon should be aligned with your analysis. If these two are not aligned, then your results will not be accurate or will be inaccurate. Any problem so far up till here? Okay, so this is sampling. This is a very simple reading just about the types of samples, biases, and basics of sampling.